I'm Carlene, and this is Diva Tonight. I have with me on Zoom Jodi Law, and she is in Manchester, UK, United Kingdom, I guess is what you say. Most people say the UK, so how are you?
Hi, Carlene. Yeah, okay.
That's good.
The accent's not very Mancunian.
Definitely. I think a lot of people especially here in North America, we're always a little bit obsessed with the British accent or, just any accent that sounds different from ours because it's carried as the well-spoken, right? So.
And so then an Australian accent comes on and it throws everything completely. Sorry about that.
That's okay. So anyways, the show is Diva Tonight, and this is 40, a female perspective. And basically, I'm talking to women who are 40 or women who are older just to talk about their personal stories and their personal experiences. And for you, you've had quite the journey. You've worked in the healthcare sector health system for 30 years. And, I think the hardest thing to discuss is being in an emotionally abusive marriage for 11 years. I'm not married, but I think I can understand what that's like myself because abusive family is what I grew up with. And I don't really talk about it, but I think when you're at this stage in life, you are comfortable talking about certain things. So for you, what was the deciding factor in leaving an abusive relationship? What was the turning point?
Yeah, that's it. I have come such a long way since then. But for me, there was a couple of things that happened, actually. So it was actually a 20-year marriage.
Yeah.
And we were about 12 years in before I had children. So at that stage, my children were really like 5 and 7. They were young. And it had got to the stage where I didn't have any input with them in the relationship. I was working and basically bringing in the money and long shifts. So I'd go to work and they were in bed, and I'd get home and they were in bed. And so when I did get to see them, they already had the three of them, as in my ex-husband and the 2 children, had their routine going on. So even when I wasn't working, it was like I was a lodger in my own home. And so there was a couple of things that happened. I met someone who I just found really interesting, and we moved around a lot. So I wasn't, even though I went to work, like you say, you don't talk about that sort of stuff. Like you just don't. And emotional abuse is a funny thing because like physical abuse, you can see it, but emotional is a totally different thing. You basically end up second guessing yourself all the time. You don't know who you are anymore at all because everything that you think you believe is questioned by the other party. So you're really lost. And so we've been in a place this time for 2 years, and I got to know a couple of the girls that I work with. And there was a couple of situations where it was just so evident that my ex-husband was just so rude to them. And I thought, oh my God, it's not just me at all. It's not me, it's him. And they were just so blatant. And I had got to that point where I didn't have the children in my life how I wanted to be a parent. And it was just like, that's it. I'd had enough. Like there was no plan other than I need to get out of here. And so I did. I literally packed a suitcase and I paint. So I took a couple of canvases and left. And the story that I think he told the children was that I was just going to stay with a friend but he's not very open about those things. So I don't actually know what story he did tell the children. Anyway, life's a lot different now. But at the time, yeah, it was, I'm so pleased I left. But oh my God, the heartache that you go through when you walk down the steps of the property that you've been living with and when they're out going for a coffee and you just don't go back. Like,
yeah, it feels like you left a life that you were so used to, right? And I always wonder, because it's like they say that we kind of like embody the life that we grew up with. So I don't know, were your parents married? Did they have a good marriage? Did you have good role models in that
sense?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Like it was so different to how I grew up. Like, no, I had my childhood was middle class mum, dad, three sisters, and very uneventful, which is pretty good compared to what I've experienced.
So it's like a total experience. Like it's more
Well,
like a trauma.
that's the thing, isn't it? It's either like you grew up or it's totally opposite. It's a bit like, that's what I say to my daughter, you do realize you'll either marry someone like your father or someone totally opposite. It's not an in-between thing. And I went totally opposite with my relationship.
Yeah. And you know what? I think it's you don't know someone until you live with them and their behavior changes. And there's obviously some issues that they haven't dealt with. And you can only help so much, right? And so,
but also though, I wasn't in a good place when I met him. You don't meet people like that if you're happy about yourself. And he was quite a bit older than me, so there was a lot of issues going on. And I had travelled on my own. I'd done a lot of stuff on my own, and I wasn't happy with my career choice. All these things that bundled up into me not having a very high self-esteem anyway.
Yeah.
Because if I had been happy, I would have met someone that I was happy with. Do you know what I mean?
They always say that. So I was talking to a colleague of mine yesterday, and she's, there's a lot of things like, when you listen to these podcasts, like the Mel Robbins podcast, or even the Greatness podcast, where they talk about how you have to be happy with yourself and where you are in life to attract that kind of person. And you
Absolutely.
said do you feel that
100%.
way? Yeah.
And that's the thing. Like, so my healing journey began when I left there, and I've learned so much about me since, because I didn't know anything about me. I mean, even just basic stuff. It was like I had no blueprint of how to live life. It was that whole, when I got out, like I can remember, this is how I smile and laugh, because it's just like, how does an intelligent woman get herself into this position? But it doesn't matter. I mean, anyone, it can happen to anyone. That's the thing.
Yeah.
So I can remember going to work not long after I'd left, and my sister had given me enough money to get a car. So I remember in my head, it was such a big deal. I had to visualize how I was going to go to the petrol station and get petrol in the car, because I was just so stressed about the fact, because I hadn't done it on my own. Like, and then that was before I got to work. I was just so stressed. It was crazy. But that's the extent it was. It was, that's what happens when you,
what do you say? It's what happens when you're going through the motions, or you're just going through your day? It was completely that.
It's just like there was no blueprint on how to live my life outside that, because I'd been in such a cocoon for so long. We moved around so much and we did so much. Yeah, so we had no community output. It wasn't, and I'd never owned a car. We had a joint car, but I didn't drive it much. It was a very, very controlling situation. It's so, it's just so unhealthy. And so when I actually did get out and I had to start living on my own, I had no blueprint on how to live on my own. It was just bizarre, because I hadn't done anything on my own for such a long time.
Yeah. But what I want to know is, where did you meet him? Like you said, you were a lot younger when you did. So
yeah, I actually met him I'd been traveling overseas over here. I'd done the European stint like a lot of Australians do.
Yeah.
And I'd gone back to Perth, and he was out there. He'd actually been a 10-pound pom. So he'd lived there, and he'd been back in 2, and he was out there, and that's when I met him. So that's right. I've been traveling around, not knowing where to look and what to do, and went back home and met him. And I was looking for direction. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. It's like when you're young and you don't understand the world. Like you said, we're not given the blueprint of how to raise a child. Like, there's books on it, but there's not, until you're actually going through it yourself, or even if you have like role models, like you're saying, it's being confident in yourself and knowing, like, this is not a good person, like it, and knowing to have boundaries too. I think having that self-confidence it's easier said than done. It really is.
And this is the thing. I think, like, I look back now, like I've got, yes, absolutely, I've got boundaries, and I'm totally confident in myself. But this is 11 years later. I'm a totally different person. But it took, excuse my French, it took balls. Because when you come, like, I was in such a low spot, but everything that I've learned, it's incredibly empowering. And you don't have to be at that point that I was at. to benefit from all the stuff that I'm now imparting to people with the work that I do. And but it is so powerful that if you've got that confidence within you, then it's kind of like nothing matters. Whatever happens, you can deal with. It's that. So,
but getting out. But I mean, you've experienced it, and other women have. And if someone is listening and they're in an abusive relationship now, and they don't feel like they can get out, if they have kids, they don't, you know what I mean? What do you say to them? Because like you said, it took you so long to find the courage and determination to be like, I'm leaving. I can't do this anymore.
Yeah, well, it is a really good question, because obviously with all this, there is no right and wrong. And like there's so much judgment attached to all of this. Yeah. But honestly, if they're listening, just do it. Just whatever it takes to do, to find some internal thing and leave. And, like statistically, it takes, now this was about 10 years ago, it might even be longer. But for someone, this is even with just physical abuse, it takes 7 times on average for a woman to leave. And she keeps returning, but 7 times on average before they actually leave fully. So for some women, it's a hell of a lot longer. But it's that habit that they get in. That it just is just a habit. It's what they're natural and they're comfortable with, even though it's abusive. And it does take courage to change habits, even if it's just a simple habit of like eating too much chocolate. Like how difficult is that? Let alone something that's that grassroots level that every time you get up in the morning, you're in fear. It's a terrible situation. And there's so many people in those situations. Yeah. Very much.
And I'm sure like even when you left, like you had to do a lot of self-healing,
Oh my God. Seriously, the walking out was the reality is the walking out was the easy bit, because you are totally on your own. And yes, there are organizations out there that help, but to be honest, I left without my children, and
I wanted to ask about that.
I didn't have the children. So I got less help because I didn't have the children.
Do you feel like you had to leave the kids, like for you to get out?
Definitely. Like I was in mentally, I wasn't in a state where I could, and also because the relationship had gone like it gone, he was Mr. Mum, so it was less traumatic for them. If I'd taken them with me, I had no infrastructure that had to deal with my children, and I was the one earning the money as well. So do you know what I mean? So none of that was in place. So if I'd waited to sort that out, I never would have left. That's the truth. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And what's the relationship like now with your kids?
Bloody fantastic.
There we go. I love that.
It's so honestly,
I can feel the energy when you say that. You're like, bloody fantastic. I feel it when you say that.
Yeah.
So that's amazing for sure. It's like it took you, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. And so you had to do what you needed to do for yourself first before you could take care of them, right?
Oh, look, 100%. 100%. And, like I never lost contact with them, and I always saw them. But I mean, initially, like it was kind of like, well, what do I do with my kids when I have them? Because I hadn't had them in any circumstances. It was really basic stuff. But what is it like to be a mum? I don't know. Haven't been it on my terms.
Oh, and then they've gotten used to living with their dad and living in that kind of environment too, where he spent most of the time with them, right? And while you were at work, right? So, yeah.
I mean, obviously, it's not like your normal mother-daughter or mother-son relationship, but it's fantastic. And my daughter's actually just left for uni this last year, but prior to that, we were actually living together again. And so after 9 years, we were living together. So it's been you're just so grateful for the little things, even the 17-year-old tantrums and all the things that go with the hormones attached to being a teenager. But it's really precious, I have to say. It's almost like brings tears to my eyes how good it is. And it's just normal. Like we still argue. Like she triggers me absolutely. But I love every second of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So what is she studying in school?
She's at university. She's doing liberal arts, and she's got herself into rowing, which she loves. And she's finding out who she is. And
Yeah.
It's really lovely to watch. The idea of let's be in, because in the UK, in Australia, when we went to uni, you live in the city where the university is, whereas in the UK, everyone goes away to university, so they learn how to cook and communicate and all those sort of things away from home.
So it's kind of like the experience itself to go away from home life and start a new life on campus and figure out who you are as a person. Oh, okay. I think I always wanted to do that when I was home. I wanted to go away, but my mom was like, no, you're staying here. And then I went to York here in Toronto. And I mean, it was a good experience. I met some good friends there, but I think there's a part of me, I think they escape to, like in the movies, they make it seem so surreal, right? And
so absolutely. And I think that's what they totally. It's total sort of social media movies now, for sure.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Is it ever? Was it that whole experience? You brought her to school, like on campus, and then you helped her get settled in, and was it emotional for you too? Like, it's like you're not a complete empty nester because your son is obviously not ready for university yet, but how did that feel?
It was, I mean, it was empty. It was like an empty nest when she'd gone. And she was very emotional about it too. But it's like, once they settle in and make a couple of friends, like she's really enjoying it. She's really enjoying the whole experience, very social and fitting in nicely. And it is very much like, okay, so look at it now. I don't have to be where I am because I was here for her education. So where will I be? But I mean, in the UK somewhere, because Australia's a long way away.
Yeah.
When if I went back to Australia, it's like a 20-hour flight to get back. So you'd never see your children, maybe once every 5 years or something. So that's not on the cards at the moment, but it opens up other options. And it's definitely different, even though it was only one child, one teenager.
Yeah. What was it like growing up in Australia? I mean, you are the first that I've met from Australia. And I mean, what was that like? Tell me.
I grew up in the country. So Perth, in Western Australia, Perth is the most isolated city in the world. And I grew up 5.5 hours south of Perth.
Wow.
So right on the bottom, if you kept going south, you would hit the Antarctica. So as far as you can go south in Western Australia. And it like space and simple. Space, sea, sun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And they're the three things that I miss most. Is just everything big, whereas everything here is small.
Right. So it's kind of like, it's like more of a small town where you knew your neighbors and in that kind of community. Is that what you mean?
Yes, it was very much like that, actually. Yeah, I mean, now the population in the town is 16,000 people in the Shire as well, so in the farming community. And
oh my gosh, in the Shire. When I hear that, I think of Lord of the Rings.
There is no traffic lights in the town. There's lots of roundabouts, but there's still no traffic lights. And this is how many years later?
16 years later. Oh my gosh. So is it true? Like in Lord of the Rings, when they say in the Shire, do you think that they've pictured it the same way, or it's kind of like they've made it more Hollywood? You know what I mean? I don't know if you've seen Lord of the Rings.
I haven't seen Lord of the Rings.
Oh, you haven't?
I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's
the Shire is just
reference.
Surrounding countryside.
Yeah.
Where the farmers
exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think they've done a justice to that. That's the only picturesque that I have when I think of it that way. That's why I said that. So yeah. That's so amazing. You've had quite the journey. So even still, I mean, you career-wise, you were working in the health sector, right? And so what was that like? I mean, you were working long hours, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've traveled with that all around Australia. So I've done all sorts of different bits and pieces in different areas of nursing. And then I ended up in intensive care, postgraduate in that. Yeah, and it's now that I'm not in it any longer. And then I ended up actually in a cardiac catheterization laboratory, which is basically when you have a heart attack, you come into us and we'll put in stents to open up the blood vessels.
Oh,
Or if you need a
right.
pacemaker,
Yeah.
put a pacemaker in.
Oh my gosh, my uncle's a cardiologist, so he puts in the pacemakers. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
So that was sort of where I ended up with all that. And parts of it are fantastic. Like the cardiology, there is so much research and so many moves forward in technology and what they do in the hospital setting. But there's also a lot of things that happen in the hospital setting, that chronic illness, for example, that isn't dealt so well with. And the more I got involved in, so I got involved in energy medicine way back when I left the relationship 11 years ago, 12 years ago nearly. And I started yoga, actually. So that was my first experience of, I actually was introduced to yoga, and I joined this regular yoga studio. And they have this special start of for 6 weeks for $25. So I go along and I knew I needed some assistance to get through the working day. So I went every day. And the first 2 weeks I was in tears at the end of every class. And I figured that, I get this sort of relief. I didn't really know what was going on, but there was got to be something. And then not so long after that, I started a yoga teacher training course. And then, so straight away, when I started that's when things started to change, because I was introduced to people, these beautiful people who I hadn't had in my life before. And then 3 months into that, I was introduced to energy psychology. So it was all about what your emotions and the connection between your emotions and your body. And basically I got to work on myself for the next 18 months. And it was completely, no question, it was transformational. But then life happens, and then my ex-husband, who's English from Manchester, decides he's moving the children to the UK. And they all have dual citizenship, and I had to get a visa to get here.
Wow.
And I didn't get the first visa I applied for, did I? It was such a...
Always a challenge, isn't it? We just can't get things the easy way. It's like, yeah.
I know. So clearly, I wasn't ready to go. So 2 years later, I got over here. And
oh my gosh, it took you 2 years. Wow.
I know, this is like, we're part of the Commonwealth. Australia is part of the Commonwealth. We speak the same language. Our qualifications at a higher standard than the ones here. So, but I wasn't coming on a nursing visa. It was access right to child's visa, because the children were here.
Oh, right, right.
And I didn't get it the first time round because it was on financial grounds. In the time that I applied, they changed the goalposts. So I went through an agency, and they said to me, no, just show that you got $10,000 in your account. That's fine. So I just showed I had $10,000 in my account. And in the time that I applied, in the 3 months it takes to get it, they changed the goalpost, and I needed $20,000. So they wouldn't take me on financial grounds. So I had to wait another 6 months to reapply. Yeah, I know.
Horrible. Yeah.
And then when I got here,
I did giving you financial advice.
Yeah, this is it. Exactly.
I'm like, I want my money back. You guys gave me horrible advice. Now I have
they actually did. They got me through. They did the whole thing.
They did.
The next time, but 9 months later, sort of thing. So, and then when I got here, I actually did more modalities, because for me, that was my way of coping with a move. Only knowing your ex-husband and children come to a new life in the UK. So,
wow.
Yeah.
A new life beyond your choice. You know what I mean? It was kind of like you're going
to follow your children, aren't you?
Yeah, of course. You can't not. No. Yeah. What a journey. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so wait a minute. So when you moved to the UK, what was that like? Did you have to get your own place and start all over again? Right?
It's really interesting when you move to a new country, because you have no credit rating. You don't exist. And so even like to open a bank account, I had to open online bank accounts, because I couldn't get one in the high street, because I had no credit rating. So,
oh my gosh, yeah.
I know. Wow. It's like you're a no person. So it's been an interesting thing. And I guess, so I walked straight into a nursing job, though, in the private sector over here. And it was, I'd been doing energy medicine back at home, part-time nursing. And there's so much red tape here in the health, like so much more than in equivalent in Australia. So, paperwork involvement. I mean, I know it's the health system in Australia. There's a lot more paperwork than there ever was when we started into the profession. But here, honestly, and just the politics attached to the work environment, it was just unbelievable. And I guess the more you get involved in energy medicine as well, your life and your beliefs and your ideals change, and you're living from your heart. So it's a lot hard. I've always been being Australian, you're pretty blunt anyway. But the more you get into energy work, your authenticity that's the key to your life. That's your,
and when you say energy work, are you talking about living a life with mindfulness in mind, or just mindful living? Is that what you're saying when you
so I guess everything, or? So if you look at life as everything is energy, the way we think and what we say and movement, all of that. So the only reason we're not feeling great is because we've got energy blocks in our body. And when you start looking at life from in a mind, body, soul sense from energy, your whole life can't help but change. And so that began with yoga, because yoga is a form of energy medicine. You're doing movement with the breath and you're moving energy. And then the energy psychology, you're working emotions are just an energy. You're using emotions to tune into your body, and where are you feeling that discomfort, or what emotion are you feeling? And you're getting the energy to move through emotions. So, and then mindfulness is all about tuning into you. What is it that you are feeling? So being okay with whatever it is that you're feeling and just allowing that to be there, rather than focusing on a story that doesn't feel great. Focus on the feeling, get the feeling to move. Because the more you focus on the story, the more you are just playing out at that frequency of story. So if it's not a great story and it makes you feel annoyed or aggravated or scared, then the more you tell that story, you're staying in that same loop of energy frequency. So if you can start to feel your energy and getting it flow, then you're going to transform it and raise the frequency and feel a darn sight better. So there's a lot of things that energy is, because energy is everything. But there's a whole systematic approach you can take to it when you're starting to have that transformation and change the way you think. Because again, it's habits. How do we change those habits and rewire the neural pathways in the brain?
Diva Tonight with Carlene will be back. Send us a message on Instagram at diva_tonight.